Sometimes in ISII, the whole system may appear to slow down, and there is a public webpage on this called the Large Entities Query, and it's explained somewhat here. It says the more identity records that an entity has, the larger it becomes. Sometimes the results of processing incoming identity data can cause the system to over-resolve identity records during entity and relationship resolution. And large entities can cause a marked slowdown in system performance. So what they suggest that you do is run this SQL query here. However, it has several problems. For one, this should be a comma, and there's no comma. And then here, this should say having a count of, and that's not there. So the actual SQL that you want to run is listed here. And why don't we run that now? So I've logged into the data server. I'm going to do a db2, and I just copied and pasted that command in. And then we can see that none of our, in the sample amount of data that I have, none of our records exceed 100. And actually, I believe there may be one or two that have more than one, and sure enough, there are. Now, what you're looking at here is when an entity, and you're looking at entity ID and identity count. And an entity, if you look at the glossary page here, you will see is a collection of one or more identities that represent the same person, and this is the key part, the same person, organization, place, or item. See also attribute, entity, model, identity, and relationship. An identity is a collection of attributes from a data source that represent a person, organization, place, or item. See also attribute, characteristic, or entity. And an attribute is a characteristic or trait of the entity that describes the entity. For example, telephone number of an employee is one of the employee attributes, or, well, I should say and. You also have characteristics, which are user-defined traits or properties that is associated with an identity that is not commonly expressed as a name, a number, address, or email. This attribute allows users to extend the product, and that's really the key here. It's to extend the product by defining customizable entity attributes that are meaningful to their data sources. You're seeing that there were three identities. So this could be like John Smith, maybe with lowercase j and an s, and it could be an uppercase j and an s as a second identity, and a third identity might be someone like Johnny, or and so on and so on. Each of those is an identity, but the system will resolve them all into a single entity. And that's exactly what's happened here. So there were three entries for, let's say, Johnny, and then that became entity ID 1032. And what happens is if you are ETLing data into your database at, say, and you're doing millions of records, say, if you have lots and lots of identities that need to be resolved, you could run into a major problem in that you may not have three here. You may have 100, 200, 300, 400. You may have thousands. And that will cause a lot of processing to determine the single entity ID. So if you're in that boat and you need to talk with the support group for ISII, they may send you a utility called Import Export, and I've copied that into our data VM here as ISII Import Export. And these, if you're running on Windows, you get batch files that you can use. Otherwise, you can use these shell scripts. And we're going to use the shell scripts. What this will do is take your import file and your it will import your configuration or an existing configuration would import into your system, or it will export your existing configuration. We're going to look at that now. Okay, so here I am on the data VM, and if I do an LL, you'll see I have a folder that that we looked at just a second ago called ISII-import export. And if I do an LL here, you'll see the files in this folder, and you'll want to do a chmod to make them executable. I went ahead and did a chmod 0 capital R to recursively go into all the folders, and I did 777. That's why you're seeing this. But ultimately, what you want to do in our case is we want to send ISII support an export of our configuration. So to do that, we're going to do EAS export, and you'll notice that you immediately get an error. And what you want to do here is find the Java home, or define Java home, so that it is set to your Java home. And in our case, in this VM, it is listed here. So we'll do 64 as such, and then we'll hit enter, and now we can try to run it again, and you should see this problem. And what this is saying is that you need to set, so let's do that now, we need to set db2 dir to be equal to a valid db2 client installation. So that is your SQL lib directory. And this is our directory, so we'll hit enter and we'll try it one more time. And this time it says it's set correctly, but we need to set our db2 instance. So we're going to do exactly the same approach here, which is db2 instance, and we know that that's db2 for core. And if you didn't know that, what you could do is switch into db2 for core, connect over to your database. It really doesn't matter here so much, but then you would do a db2, a get db2, db2 get instance, and that would tell you the name of your instance. So knowing that, we'll hit enter here, and we will try one more time to run it, and there we go, we get a response now. And at this point what we need to do is give it the right parameters. Okay, so let's run this command. I'm going to clear off the screen. We'll do ES export, and we'll list the first 45 lines so you can see the parameters, the flags you can pass, and then here's the command that we actually want to run. And so I'll let you read through that, but for example, a T will give you the database type, we know it's DB2, and so on down the line. And what will happen is we'll get a file when we're done here called Austin sample export.dat, and what we're also going to do is run the file that will list out all these tables in this, and we'll go inside a folder in this directory called resources, which gives the configuration for this particular version of ISII. So you hit enter and give that a second. It says it already exists. That's because I've done this once before. I'll hit yes, and then you can see it exports those files out. And then if you want to look at it, you can open that up in say Vim, and then this is what you get, and you can see the different names, you can see the rules. And actually this is pretty interesting as a file because it will also show you a lot of the ways that names are resolved. So for example, if I did a search for Muhammad like this, it doesn't say anything, but that's only because you have to use capitals here. So if I looked up this name, you would see that these names have been, these are the similar names for that name that will help in resolution. So the same would apply if you looked up, John or Smith. You would see the same. Well, yeah, I guess there is no John or no Smith anyway, but there is John and so on. You get the idea.